Hello, welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. I'm your host, Nikki Wallman. The Jewish festival of Sukkot is also known as the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles. And the Sukkah is one of the most important elements of the festival because it represents the hut in which Moses and the Israelites lived as they wandered through the desert for 40 years on their way to the Promised Land. These huts were made of branches and they were easy to assemble, take apart and carry as the Israelites wandered their way through the desert.
By way of introduction, the whole month of Tishrei, where we celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, is actually one grand festival. The Kabbalists explained that it's our courting of God, our marriage to God, and then our coming into the home with God. So the month before Rosh Hashanah, it says that God takes us out. He woos us, and we form a relationship with God. On Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, we agree to marry God, and we get married on Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And just like a bride and a bridegroom fast on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, we too fast, and we come into the wings of God, into the chuppah, and we get married to God. Afterwards, it's a Jewish custom to celebrate for 7 days, which we call Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings. And so Sukkot represents our Sheva Brachot celebrations, where we come into close communion with God and we celebrate for 7 days in holy matrimony and wedding. After Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, and these holidays are completed, the 8th day, we then go and into the world and we play house. We get down to the nitty-gritty of the material world. So Sukkot really is a time where we get enveloped in God's loving embrace. And the Sukkah, our tabernacle, our hut, represents that. In fact, it says in Songs of Songs that God embraces us with his right hand. So if you look at the walls of the Sukkah, a complete Sukkah will have 4 complete walls. But if you have 3 walls and an opening, like an embraced hand, that is also fine. Some people will have 2 walls and a small 3rd wall. That too is acceptable. But it all is representative of the embracing of God and his presence, and us feeling so close that we come into that embracing. So it's a very joyous time, and we spend a lot of the time in the Sukkah with family, with friends, and we are joyous. It's called Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. And just like a bride and bridegroom come together and are all eyes and lovey-dovey with each other for the 7 days of their honeymoon, this is our honeymoon with God. So we feast, we spend as much time as we can in the Sukkah, not only eating, relaxing. We leave our permanent residence and we come into our temporary residence confident that we're in the embrace of God and we're protected. Some people even have the custom of sleeping in the Sukkah. It's a time to invite friends and family, and people are joyous for all 7 days, and there's a lot of inviting and socializing, which is really very nice. One of the laws states that if it becomes uncomfortable for one to eat in the Sukkah, for example, there is a torrential rain, and because of the impermanence of the schach, you get flooded out, you're allowed to go inside and continue to eat. There are Hasidim, there are pious people who, if that is the situation, will wait until the rain is finished or that uncomfortable situation has dispelled and will come back and eat in the Sukkah. A Sukkah is kosher by virtue of 2 aspects. The first aspect is its walls. The other thing and the most important of the Sukkah is the schach, which is the covering of the Sukkah. It has to be made from naturally grown trees. It cannot be taken, it cannot have plastic, or it cannot have aluminium, etc., etc. And it has to be allowed to be movable. It cannot be tied down. So that gives the impermanence of the Sukkah, but that's the mitzvah. Because what we are recreating is the way we traveled through the desert for 40 years. When the Jews traveled, it says they were covered by Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory. God had a cloud on top and on the sides and on the floor, and the Jews lived impermanently for 40 years wandering in the desert. But they had a tremendous amount of confidence in God and trust in God, and indeed, He did protect them all through these years. The Sukkah represents our confidence in God and our permanence in God, and we always ask God to spread Sukkat Shlomecha, the Sukkah of peace, on us. And our sages teach us that when the Messiah comes, when Mashiach comes, there will be a very big Sukkah, and we will all come together, the whole world, in celebration, eating the Leviathan, the Leviathan fish. And so the Sukkah is, in a sense, a prayer that as we, in our own microcosmic way, are showing our confidence in God, we pray that one day we will see the grand Sukkah, where all of us will come together and the whole world will be found in the embrace of God.
In Leviticus 23, it says, "And you shall take for yourselves on the first day of Sukkot the fruit of a goodly tree, the palm branch, a myrtle branch, and the willow of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days." Of the many symbols associated with Sukkot, the most important are the 4 species, the Lulav and the Etrog.
The lulav is from the date palm. The etrog, the citron, is the fruit that we carry with the others. The hadas is the myrtle, 3 branches of a myrtle tree, and the arava is a willow, 2 branches from a willow tree. We take those 4 species together and we hold the 4 in our hands and we give it a shake. And that's the mitzvah of the lulav, or the Lulav and Etrog, or the 4 species on Sukkot. The way you wave is in 6 directions: north, south, east, west, up and down. And there are different customs as to the order in which you do those. But the idea is that those 6 directions symbolize 4 directions: north, south, east, west is for the wind, praying for good winds. We shake up, symbolizing the rain, down, symbolizing the dew. We need water, especially in South Africa. So the 4 species represent 4 types of Jewish people, but 4 types of human beings in general. The lulav from the date palm, the date fruit from the tree, tastes good, but it doesn't smell good. That represents people that know what to do. They know the right thing. Jewish people who study the Torah and about Judaism, but they don't necessarily practice as they might. The etrog represents somebody who, well, firstly, it smells good and it tastes good. The etrog represents somebody who knows what they're meant to be doing and practices it, lives it. Then you have the myrtle, which smells good, the leaf, but it doesn't taste good. Symbolize somebody who does what they're meant to do, but they're not learned, they haven't studied. And finally, the humble willow, which has neither taste nor smell, symbolizes somebody that doesn't really know what they're meant to be doing, hasn't studied or learned, and isn't really practicing. By holding the 4 together, we're saying that every type of human being is important. If one of the 4 is missing, so you cannot do the mitzvah. 3 out of 4 isn't good enough. Everybody has their contribution to make. The mystics say that it's preferable to do the 2 mitzvot together. That means that when you shake the lulav and the etrog, you do it here in the sukkah to combine the 2 mitzvot. Others say, and this is the law, the minimum requirement, that you don't have to do that, that you can do the shaking, the taking of the 4 species, the 4 kinds, wherever it's convenient. Many do it in their home, and many do it in shul, in the synagogue. The mitzvah is done once a day. You can do it more than that, but you don't need to do more than that, and you would only make 1 blessing. The first time you do the mitzvah, you make a blessing, a bracha. The idea of the blessing is to focus one's thoughts, that one is now ready to do one of the commandments of God. When you buy your set, sometimes the three branches are separate and sometimes they're already bound together. If they're bound together, that's great, it's already done for you, but they have to be held together or bound together. And you can't just use anything to bind them together because you're only allowed to hold those three branches in your hand. So what they do is they make a very nice holder which holds the three branches. And most people don't realize that it's actually made from the leaves of the palm tree. If you'd ask them, they'd say, no, it's plastic or it's some other material, but it's not. Others take the leaves themselves and bind the three branches together with those. You can't use a rubber band or string or something else because you're only meant to be holding those four species in your hand, not anything else in your hand. And incidentally, for that reason, it's preferable to remove one's rings from one's fingers so that you're holding it in your hand and there's nothing separating from your hand and the Lulav and Etrog.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and please do tune in again next time. As always, from me, Nikki, and the entire team, shalom and have a safe and peaceful week.